Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hillside. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to all of you. What an honor it is to be here today, and also during Women's History Month as we ourselves make history in our time. It's been said here several times, we're home today. And we are home not because of a physical location. We are home because of a place in our hearts to which we are called. That is the ultimate home. I remembered about 2 or 3 days before my sister died, they had brought her home from the hospital. She was standing in her bedroom and she was looking down in the backyard. My brother and I were with her, and my father walked into the room. And my sister looked at my father and said, "Daddy, I want to go home." And my brother said, "Little sister, you're home. We brought you home. You're home." And she looked at him in the most scathing way, like, you know, this isn't home. She had reached that point. And when she did, it was like my brother, we all knew exactly what she meant. She wanted to go home. But of course, our task and our yearning is to make this place, this space, this material plane, our home as well. Earlier, we sang the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, and heaven, in the Course in Miracles, it says heaven is not a condition or a place. It is an awareness of our oneness. So when we are in this place, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So this idea of thy kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, means that kingdom of awareness that we're all one. Thy kingdom come here. Let that be here on earth as it is in heaven. You know, in the Course in Miracles, it says about Jesus, it says, he lived on the earth, but thought only the thoughts of heaven. And as we live on the earth, which teaches us separation and fear, let us stand in this space thinking only love and oneness. And as we do, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. That is why in the Christian tradition, it says about Jesus himself, he says, I stand in the breach. That breach, that disconnection between the fear that dominates the world and the love that is in our hearts. We need to make that. And in the Jewish religion, Tikkun Olam, we are here to repair the world. And the Course in Miracles also says, heaven and earth shall be as one. What that means is that there will come a day when they will not exist as two separate states. That's our purpose here, to bring heaven to earth by standing in any moment in that place where we visit when we come on Sunday, religious worship, whether it's at a mosque, whether it's a synagogue, whether it's at a temple, whether it is at a church, we visit that space and it becomes like a battery charge. And so, and we all know that from our experience, that what we go through here, we touch those moments, and then it's not just what you go through on Sunday. It's not just what you go through on Sabbath worship is. It's what happens in the days after. And then you come back the next week to be replenished. That you train your mind because you visited that place. You visited that place. And in that place, and from that place, all possibilities then emerge. There's also an old rabbinical saying, you are not expected to complete the task, but neither are you permitted to abandon it. That's our task. Now, when we visit that space of love, there's also the idea in the Course in Miracles that miracles occur naturally as expressions of love, and that in the space of the miraculous, all things are possible. So just to take that in the space of the miraculous, in the space of love. So when we were talking about how this space is home where we just get, if even for a moment, you and I are one beyond the body, beyond the body. In the body we are separate, but in the spirit there's no place where I stop and you start. That is the real meaning of only one begotten Son. We're all it. And in that space, when we even touch it, and anything is possible in that space. Now, Jack talked about being at home here, and we've talked about the metaphysical meaning of home, but we are in Atlanta. And for anyone who is interested in the idea, who recognizes the potential for political, social, economic breakthrough that emerges as form, in the realm of form, from this space of love, Atlanta's home. Atlanta's home. You know, Mahatma Gandhi said that politics should be sacred. Now, he didn't mean it should be religious doctrine or ruled by particular dictates of a particular religion. He was talking about where it should come from in our hearts, in our gut, that when we talk about politics, we should be reverent. When we talk about politics, we should be as dominated by that which is sacred as in any other conversation. But today, politics in our world, politics, which should be a very sacred space where we collectively come together, the art of making the world more beautiful, has been so infused with fear and separation and hatred that it has become a corrupted vessel. So when Gandhi said politics should be sacred, when Gandhi said there is a place within every man, woman, and child, there is a light. And he said, from that light comes all power. And he said, that light heals not only our own lives, that light heals not only our personal relationships, but all political, social, and economic relationships as well. Now, the politics of the world would say, oh no, politics is transactional. It's just treat the symptom. It's we're separate. There's this group over here and that group over there, and we all have to fight because our group matters. There is no miracle coming from that place. There is no miraculous breakthrough coming from that place. The two greatest political miracles of the 20th century, from Mahatma Gandhi and from Martin Luther King, were both accomplished through the spiritual principle of nonviolence infused into political activism. We all know Martin Luther King had told us he knew, and yet in those few hours at the Lorraine Motel, when he sat on the end of the bed, he was going over things. He didn't know exactly what, he didn't know exactly when, but he had told us he knew. And when he sat on the bed at the Lorraine Motel talking to Jesse Jackson and others, he didn't say, okay, let's go over our political strategy. He said, okay, let's go over the principles of nonviolence. The principles of nonviolence, and then Martin Luther King, having traveled to India, brought back the principles of nonviolence to the United States for application to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. He said Mahatma Gandhi was the first person in human history to take the ethic of love. Martin Luther King said the love ethic of Jesus, but to Mahatma Gandhi, it was not specifically the love ethic of Jesus. To Mahatma Gandhi, it was the love ethic at the core of all the great religious teachings. But King said he was the first person to take that love ethic and extend it beyond mere personal interaction to become a broad-scale social force for good. And that's our job too. It's our turn now. You know, it's so interesting because when you think of politics the way the world sees it, the last thing you think of is the spirit. But when you look at all the great social justice movements in the United States history, they came from the deep core of religious and spiritual fervor. Obviously among Black people in America in terms of abolition, but even in terms of the white people in terms of abolition, much emerged from the early evangelical churches in New Hampshire. And the women's suffragist movement was led in many cases by religious Quakers. And of course, Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. His political activism grew out of his ministry at Ebenezer Baptist Church. I've read every biography there is of him that I've gotten my hands on, and they all talk about the third Sunday in January of 1960 that was the day that he went from being a preacher who talked about politics to a political movement leader whose work was based on his spiritual understanding. Now, did the abolitionists have any rational basis for expecting that they could succeed? No, the situation was locked up. There's no way to measure the level of financial power, political power, brute force that was on the side of the institution of slavery. It was locked up. There was no way they said to one another, well, you know, if we just do this and we just do that, surely we will be able to handle this. They had faith. Somebody had to have faith. They saw a situation that was locked up, and what did that generation do? They unlocked it. And what did the women suffragists do after centuries of the suppression of women? The institutional suppression of women. Did any of them have reason? Did they have rational reason to expect that if we just do this and we just do that, we could get the women the right to vote? No, that situation was locked up. What did that generation do? They unlocked it. And when there was the Gilded Age and all of the inequities of the financial inequities that were perpetrated upon the working people of the United States, the early labor organizers had no reason to believe that they could overthrow that. The situation was locked up. They unlocked it. And during the civil rights movement, segregation in the American South, I don't need to tell anyone in this town, the systematic suppression of black people in the American South, Jim Crow, black code laws, segregation, it was locked up. And what did they do? They unlocked it. And they unlocked it not through sheer will. They unlocked it not through sheer reason. Love restores reason and not the other way around. They did it because of a characterological aspect of their own personhood. They did it because they believed in that which was as yet unseen. Some things in life, and this generation really needs to learn this, some things you do, not because you have a guarantee of success, you do because it's the right thing to do. You do because that way you can look at yourself in the mirror and feel some self-respect. You can look at yourself in the mirror and know, they didn't get me. You do because you can look at your own children and say, I was there and I tried. There's nothing, we've diminished the meaning of the word try. There's nothing wrong with trying. You might not be the one who is standing there when the accomplishment is made, but the very fact that you tried means the world was brought closer to the day when someone would be. Now, what's locked up today is very insidious, isn't it? It's not a specific institution like slavery. We know what to do. Somehow we have to abolish it. Or the institutional suppression of women. They knew what they had to do. They had to pass a constitutional amendment, the 19th Amendment, to give women the right to vote. It wasn't like the Gilded Age where they knew what they needed to do. They needed to establish organized labor. Like segregation, they knew what they had to do. They needed to desegregate the American South, pass the Voting Rights Act, pass the Civil Rights Act. In our time, it's not a specific institutional reality. It's not a one tumor you have to excise. It's more like a metaphysical cancer that has metastasized. It's the very idea, it's an economic paradigm. It's the very idea that the same as during slavery, the same as at the beginning of our country, that somehow property rights are more important than human beings. The very idea that short-term profits for some huge corporate entity is more important than your safety, your health, your welfare, and the safety and the health and welfare of your children, and the safety and health and welfare of your planet, and the safety and the health and the welfare of your grandchildren. And we need to rise up like our grandparents and our great-grandparents did and said, no, not while we're here, not on our watch, we will not stand. Quite simply, sometimes love says no. You know, we have this idea sometimes that love is kind of weak and okay. We saw in that video, quite a bit of it was about women not asking for permission. This is particularly difficult for women because when we say no, oh, you're not being a nice girl now. You know, We all know, we all have it written on our computers, that well-behaved women rarely make history. Yeah, that's true, but when you are actually one of those women who refuses to be well-behaved, and in the world today, man, I think it's worse today than it's been in a lot of times in our history. You have to say what they say you're supposed to say. This is as much on the left as on the right. You have to say what we want you to say, and you have to use the words we want you to say. And if you don't use the words we want you to say, you shut up now, you sit down now. What is going on? What is going on? For us, in too many ways, we've farmed out our best thinking. It's interesting because when it comes to our personal lives, we're all so smart. We're all in therapy and talking about therapy and who's in an abusive relationship and who's something toxic and who has to set a boundary and who has to just say no. That's good, actually. We laugh, but it's good. We've done the inner dive. We've looked inside and we're authentic and we're honest with ourselves and we look in the mirror and we have a real sense culturally, spiritually, psychologically. We have to clean up our stuff. But when it comes to the collective conversations about politics, we've all gone numb. We've been trained to think like sixth grade. They're doing. The experts are handling it. And we have actually farmed out our own best thinking. We've farmed out our best critical thinking, and sometimes we're afraid in the public sphere to say what we really think, because after all, it might not be considered perfect by somebody who thinks you ought to say it different. You want to make sure you're not in an abusive relationship? I'll tell you how you make sure you're not in an abusive relationship. Say no to those who are allowing carcinogens in the food you are feeding your children. You tell me how that's not an abusive relationship. Or for the poor in America who are living in the sacrifice zones, where such toxins are being spewed from factories that their little children have asthma. They cannot run for 30 seconds without running out of breath. That, for you to keep voting for the people who are allowing that to happen, that's an abusive relationship. Where's your boundary now? Why is it that we are allowing transgressions publicly in the collective field that we would never allow in our personal lives? You're gonna just spray toxins into the face of my child? Don't even think about it. And yet, when it comes to politics, isn't it interesting? We allow ourselves, in the area of intimate relationships, we would know. If you saw a friend who kept taking him back, after he had cheated on you and cheated on you and cheated on you, and yet he comes back, oh honey, just give me one more chance. After a few times, your friends take the phone away from you. And yet in politics, every 4 years, they do it again. Oh honey, let me have one more chance. Let me have one more chance. Let me have one more chance. At what point do we say, oh, actually not this time? Why is it that we will be so clear about not taking abuse in our personal lives, but collectively we keep walking down the same path? We've been played. Quite simply, we've been played. And we've been played by people who know what we want to hear, just like we do in our romantic lives. Well, he said it, and I think he meant it. I really do. He said all the right words. He knows what to say to me. He knows, and he comes back every 2 years, every 4 years, and he says those words again. I go, oh, okay. I know you're trying. I know we just need to reelect you, and it'll happen in the next term. Our ancestors did not fall for that, and neither should we. Gabor Mate, the writer Gabor Mate, I'm sure many people here have read his works and heard him. I heard him say that he grew up in Hungary. He said, I grew up in a controlled society, so I know what a controlled society looks like and feels like. He said, I'm telling you, modern North American societies are even more controlled because it's so sophisticated. It's so sophisticated, and especially now with social media. So what do? We go home. Because when we go home, we visit a realm more powerful than the realm where those psychological machinations hold. We're not held back by external chains anymore. We're held back by internal chains. And internal chains have to be broken, just like external chains have to be broken. Now, when there is light, there cannot be darkness. Where there is love, there cannot be fear. If you have a hole in the ocean, I don't care what the form of the hole, I don't care the size of the hole, the water comes in and fills it up. If we enter, and that's why the morning is so important. I love how we were all today saying good morning. Good morning is an affirmation. It's not just a greeting. Good morning. It's a good new beginning. Our Father who art in heaven, here, hallowed be thy name. I stand in that space of that which is hallowed. This world is not hallowed. I stand in the space of consciousness which is hallowed. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. All we're asking for is bread. That means just sustenance. And forgive us our debts. To forgive us our debts and to forgive us our trespasses is the same thing. Because if you trespass, there is a debt that the universe will make sure you have to pay. The universe has a perfect set of books. Forgive us our debts as we forgive those debtors, but we're not asking for something we're not willing to give. We're not asking for something. And lead us not into temptation. Love would never lead you into the temptation to fear. Leave us not in temptation. This world is a temptation. This world is to forget that we're here to love one another. This world is to teaches us to think we're separate from one another. We've all got to come out of our silos. That is why this place is so beautiful. I so commend you for that. You can feel it here. Right? Leave us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, because evil is that which is brought into the world through loveless thinking. Take us away from the loveless thinking. Deliver us from the manifestations of harm that come from that loveless thinking. For thine love is the kingdom, and love is the power, and love is the glory, and to stand on that. And forever and ever means in one moment. You know, this idea of forever and ever is powerful. It means the eternal now. Forever and ever means it was true the minute before this, it's true in this moment, and it'll be true in the next moment. And something's going to happen in this moment to tempt me to think, oh, love's not the power here. No, in this moment too, I'm going to stand on it. Because I went to church on Sunday, I went to the mosque, I went to the synagogue, I went to the temple, I went to the mindfulness meditation class, I went to therapy, I went to wherever it was, but I hold on to what I got there. And I'm going to stand in every space. And at this point, not only in the spaces where it's comfortable. And I want to tell you something about my own experience. I've learned it. If you talk about love and justice and mercy, good. You talk about love and justice and mercy, you can even write a book about it. You can write a book about love and justice and mercy, and you can even have a successful book about it, and the system says, good on you, honey. I hope it's a bestseller. You try to stand on that in the political sphere, they're coming after you. Because there are places where, oh, don't bring that stuff in here. You go stay in your lane now. You can do that in church. Just don't try to take it onto the street. And Martin Luther King didn't stay in the church. They went into the streets. A bus boycott wasn't in the church. It was in the street. They had gotten it from the church. You know, I have my own Unity pulpit in Detroit, Michigan, Warren, Michigan. And I had the honor of Rosa Parks coming quite often. And I said to her a question, which of course gazillions of people asked her. And I was told later, Marianne, you were not the only person she gave that answer to. But still it meant so much to me. I said, Rosa, what made you do it? What made you do it? In that moment, what made you do it? And she said to me something that has so many layers of meaning. And the fact that she said it to a lot of people, good on her. She said with that beautiful beatific smile she had, I was tired. You know, in AA, they say you grow sick and tired of being sick and tired. They have us so distracted and so numb that we're not facing what's true. We're so sick and tired. We ourselves are sick and tired. Something's not changing that needs to change. And it's all like scrambled up. And we forget too often that, no, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. 39% of Americans who now say they regularly skip meals in order to pay their rent. In America, half of the people who pay rent in this country can't really afford the rent. The majority of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, the majority of Americans cannot afford an unexpected $1,000 expenditure. 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt. 68,000 Americans dying from lack of health care. 18 million Americans cannot afford the prescriptions that their doctors give them. Oh yeah, the system's bragging that more people have health care. Can we talk about how many times the people who have health care have coverage to go to the doctor, but then the coverage won't cover their operation that the doctor says you need. It won't cover the medicine the doctor says you need. It won't even cover the test the doctor says you need, but the system's bragging because they gave you just a little. We've been trained to expect too little. And once again, as women, it's really difficult because if you stand up and say, no, I'd like the whole thing, please, I think that's what we're supposed to have, you're being a bad girl now. You're not attractive when you do that. And that's why it's so beautiful, you know, the little girl who was up here, that we train our children to stand in the space of their power. So we too are living in a space where something's broken and it needs to be put back together. Something's wounded and it needs to be healed. And the mind game going on inside today is that we're being told it's not really a wound. We're okay. And for those of you who have escaped, you know, if your kids are smart, if your kids are talented, if your kids are brilliant at something, the system will let them in. The system needs to pick out the best and brightest in every generation to run this thing. And then if they escape and they get to go to Morehouse or Harvard or wherever, and they make it into the club, and then they complain about social or economic injustice, the system will say, well, what are you complaining about? You made it. What are you complaining about? So it's really even more and more of a mind game. And we need to do the same level of smart thinking about all of this that we would do with our own individual lives. And I know it's locked up, and as I said, our ancestors unlocked it. Why? Because God always sends a Moses. And that Moses is an aspect of who we are. Moses is an aspect of who we are. And you know, Moses in the Bible was someone who had made it out. You know, the Pharaoh's daughter had found him. He was raised, he had made it. He was okay. They didn't even know he was a Jewish baby. He'd made it. He didn't have to. But he realized, no, it's not just about me. It's about my people. So it doesn't matter if you've made it. It doesn't matter. That's what the system wants you to think. Well, you made it. You're making a decent living. What are you complaining about? You're talented. You're going to make it. You're so good, those scores. You're so good at music. You're so good at sports. You're so good intellectually. You made it. No. Don't let that, as my father would say, don't let them do that to you. It's not just about me. It's about we. It's about all of us. It's about all of us. So when Moses was told by God, tell the Pharaoh, let my people go. And Pharaoh said, Moses, what's happened to you? You're doing fine. Why are you complaining about my people? And then Moses went back to God and he said, God, he said no. And God said, well, you could tell him I'm going to send some locusts. And the Pharaoh said, well, I'll take your locusts. Anyway, he sent a lot of things. He sent a lot of plagues. Finally, Pharaoh said, take your people and get out of here. And Moses went to the people, and he said, we can go. Let's go. We gotta hurry before he changes his mind. Did the people say, oh, thank you, Moses? No. They said, what did you do? They had grown used to the slave condition. It was a perverse kind of comfort zone. Yeah, slaves, but we have 3 meals a day. We can function. We're surviving. He said, no, we gotta go quick. They said, where are we going? He said, we're going to the promised land. They said, where? He said, we're going to the promised land. They say, what road are we taking? He said, we're going out into the desert. Into the desert, are we? And we're just gonna like what, walk across the desert? Yeah. And what are we gonna eat? Well, I don't know. God's gonna show us. They were not pleased with him. You know, when you eat matzah, it's because there was no time for the bread to be leavened. They gotta go quick. And then throughout the path, the Israelites were not happy with him. They were not happy with him. They felt, many of them, we were better off in the old condition. We could still function. They allowed us to function. They didn't allow us to spread our wings. They didn't allow us to self-actualize. We were still slaves, but we could function. And then when they got to the Red Sea, it was about the time they got to the Red Sea that the Pharaoh had decided he wanted his slaves back. So the Pharaoh had sent the Egyptian soldiers to get the Israelites and bring them back into slavery. And if they fought, they would either be killed or taken back as slaves. But if they walked forward, they would drown in the Red Sea. Now, what at that point happened? You know, every time you read the Bible, you know, I've never heard a person who says, I'm not going to go to Easter services this year because I know the story. You never hear a person say, I'm not going to go to Passover this year or the Seder because I know the story. Every year you meet the story from a deeper place within yourself. And so these stories, it's like, another layer I didn't see before. The story doesn't change. The story is eternal. We teach them to our children. We revisit them every Sunday or Saturday or Friday or whatever our Sabbath day is, and we take them in at a deeper level. You know, Moses had a rod. And just like Merlin has a wand, it's the same thing. The rod is that consciousness. When you pray here, when you hear the words here, it's your rod. It's not horizontal consciousness of what the world is telling you. It's you hold your rod up. And Moses, sometimes when he held the rod up, the Israelites, meaning all humanity, were victorious. And sometimes it was so tiring, you just couldn't do it. One of my favorite etchings I once saw was a story from the Bible, the moment when Moses, it was just too much of a burden, he couldn't do it, and there was his brother Aaron on one side and someone named on the other side holding him up by the shoulders. You can do, hold that rod up, hold that rod up. Thine is the kingdom, and thine is the power, and thine is the glory. I'm gonna go with love here, I don't care what you say. I'm gonna go with what I know in my heart here, I don't care what you say. Now, God told him, take your rod, put it over the water, put it over the water. And then God told him, Moses, start walking into the water. Moses said, what am I supposed to do? Just walk in, walk in. And as Moses walked into the water, it got higher and higher and higher and higher. What am I doing? I'm walking into the water. I'm gonna drown. What am I doing? I'm walking into the water. I'm gonna drown. And it had to come all the way up to his nostril. And that's when the Red Sea parted. We have to walk into the water. We have to walk into the water. We have to do in our time what the civil rights movement did, what the women's suffrage movement did, what the abolitionist movement did, what the early labor organizers did. We have to stand. And we can't just take it on one thing at a time. What the insurance companies are doing, that's why we don't have health care. Pharmaceuticals doing, that's why 1.3 million people are rationing their insulin. What the big food companies did, which is why we have carcinogens they don't have in other countries. What chemical companies are doing, which is why we have chemicals in the pesticides that we know harm a child's brain. What big agriculture is doing, ruining what it's doing to our farmers, to our land, to our food. What big oil is doing, which is why we're ramping up rather than ramping down fossil fuel extraction, which they're also hiding from us by doing all these investments in green energy so we don't notice that they're investing even more in dirty energy. And all the profits made for the military-industrial complex. Because no matter who they are, Republican or Democrat, they fall in line with big oil and they fall in line with defense contractors. Well, in other generations, when that kind of assault was being made on people and planet and democratic principles, our ancestors rose up. Our ancestors rose up. They saw a system that was locked and they unlocked it. They saw the Red Sea, they saw the soldiers behind them, and they knew if they stood in faith, the Red Sea would part. We have to own our power now. Martin Luther King said there's a power inside us more powerful than the power of bullets. He said we need external changes in our circumstances and also internal changes in our souls. He said it's time to inject a new dimension of love into human civilization. And I'll just end by telling you a story, given that it is Women's History Month. Part of my own personal women's history is my own mother in all of our lives. If you're going to acknowledge the history of women, acknowledge your own mother today. My mother used to say that the main responsibility of a woman was to take care of her children and to take care of her home. And when I was a young woman and I used to hear that, I thought my mother wasn't very with it. I thought she was very retro and regressive. No, Mom, that's very uncool. And as I got older, I realized my mother knew a lot of things. And it is as true today as it was then. It's just that we've expanded to realize that for a woman to say, my responsibility is to take care of the children, it can't just be my children. It has to be every person's child. It has to be the children on the other side of town, and it has to be the children on the other side of the world. And when we say that it is an aspect of the power of a woman and the responsibility of a woman to take care of our home, we have to realize that can't just be my home. That has to be the earth itself, which is the home we share. And so just like that little girl, there was a little girl in that video who was standing up and saying right to the camera, don't ask for permission. I think we need to look at each other and say, don't ask for permission. Say it elegantly, say it nonviolently, say it beautifully, say it kindly, but say, just like the abolitionists did, just like the civil rights movement did, just like the women's suffragists did, just like the early labor organizers did, what was shall now continue, will not continue on my watch. What was, and I'm here to give birth to what shall be. It is our time to give birth to what shall be. And if we are honoring women's history, let's remember, we need young women to continue to give birth to children if the human race is to continue. But no matter what we are, no matter what sex we are here to give birth to a new world. We need to become pregnant in our hearts. We need to become the incubators for that which shall be. A world of justice, a world of mercy, a world of truth. We need to go home. We need to make it on earth as it is in heaven. And wherever you stand, whatever your responsibilities are, whatever your relationships, you do it there, you be you. Whatever your particular area is, whatever it is, you stand for that which is possible, you be you. Wherever you are, wherever you stand, whatever situation, stand for the alternative, stand for the better possibility, you be you. And that's what we're here to do. And if we all do that together, if we all come home, and then we go out into the world knowing that the point of coming home was not just so that we be comforted, it was so that we gain a power that we then take with us into the world to bring comfort, to bring hope, to bring inspiration, to bring love. Then we will do in our generation what others have done in theirs. And we will look in the mirror, and we will be able to say with great self-respect, we did it. We did what we could, and love prevailed. Thank you very, very much. God bless you. Thank you.